Okay. I want to check the microphones. Check, check.
I imagine Dottie's on her way. Check, check, check. Hello? Hello, 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 hello. I just keep turning the... Hello, hello. Very good. Thank you.
We are at 7 o'clock.
Okay. It's 7 o'clock. I call the meeting of City of University Heights City Council meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, October 10th, 2017. And council is present, and Dottie just came in. All 5 council are here. And first order of business is approval of minutes. I want to approve both the September 12th council meeting and September 18th special meeting. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes that have been given to you by Chris Anderson? Hearing none, the minutes are approved for September 12th and special meeting September 18th. I see Pete Damiano's here and Mike Haverkamp for consideration of Resolution 1741, granting a permit pursuant to Ordinance 159-2C, allowing residents to produce sound audible across property lines at or near the Stella parking lot of 1006 Melrose Avenue to host an event from 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. on October 12, 2017 to benefit neighborhood centers of Johnson County. Mike, do you want to start?
Sure. This is, we've granted sound permits. Sorry, Pete. I don't want to misspeak there before I, Pete is definitely good music, not noise. And with that, Pete, you want to talk about what the event is and what the, I'm so sorry.
We're going to be making noise.
Sorry.
That hopefully has some musical tone to it.
Yes.
If you all are inclined at the Stella parking lot, similar to what we did last summer. Our band is called Homebrewed. We've got 10 members, play blues, rockabilly, and we call it Music with a Mission. We do a lot of fundraisers for different groups, and this one is for the neighborhood centers of Johnson County. They're a group that support low-income families in the community. The proceeds from this will go towards some English language classes that they are swamped with requests, both for adults and for preschool children. And it's an Oktoberfest theme, so there will be grilling brats and having some beer and having some music, and hopefully be a great way to bring people together in the neighborhood and have some fun, as well as support a good local organization.
Yeah. And that's this Thursday.
That's this Thursday.
This Thursday.
Is that an advertisement or is that a request?
Yeah, a little of both.
Is there a,
I would move adoption of Resolution 1741.
I second it.
okay, motion by Mike, second by Jerry. Let's see, roll call vote.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Lane.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Carried.
Good
Great.
luck on your event, Pete.
Thank you, appreciate it. And if anyone has any place to put a poster, I will leave a few
Great.
over here. If you,
I'll take some to the office. Yeah.
Thank
I was at Pete's last event too, and it was a wonderful time. A wonderful time.
thank you all very much.
Thank you. We have a tree board report. Virginia Miller's here. Thanks for coming, Virginia.
Thank you. Virginia Miller, 7 Glencrest Drive, and I'm the chairperson of the tree board. We're about to go through a big round of removals here, so I wanted to come tonight and give everybody an update and make sure that if there are any concerns that we have addressed them before we hit the chainsaws. This stems, I'll go back to the beginning here. This stems from a big storm that went through last summer that took down 5 trees and one of them hit a house. And as an arborist, that got me thinking that we can't let this keep happening. Somebody's going to get hurt if we don't do something. So I've worked with the DNR, Mark Vitash, and Emma Hannigan to complete a condition survey this summer in June. We went through and looked at all this public right-of-way trees, only public trees, not private trees. to identify ones that were either dying or structurally unsound. We came up with a list of 16 trees that needed to be removed. The way we collected the data was with these GIS handheld units, and so we had to send all that off for processing, and it took about 3 months to get the data back. And so to give you an idea of how accurate of a determinant this is, one of the trees came down. Alice Haugen would be familiar with which one it was. Between when we identified the trees and when we got the list back to do the removals. So we notified all the homeowners or property owners, because some of them are rental houses, got quotes from 4 different companies that have good reputations. We chose the company with the lowest cost. To be honest, the cost is so low that had we not worked with this company before, I probably would have rejected it, because I would have thought they have no idea what they're doing. But I don't know. I'm not sure exactly why their bid came back so low, but I'll take it. It's a really good deal, and most homeowners were very relieved when I distributed the numbers to them.
What company is it?
Black Squirrel,
Squirrel.
Urban Forestry. So as I said, they did the removals last year after the storm
okay.
in 2016, and they did fine work. So after we got the numbers back, I circulated another round of letters to the homeowners and followed up with calls and emails and home visits in some case, just to make sure that everybody understands what's happening and what portion of the cost they're going to be responsible for. I've got 2 homeowners that want to be left off the list for this year, and we will talk about this again with them in the spring. So at this time, we are going to remove 13 trees from our city boulevards in the next 4 weeks. They're all big trees. It's going to be pretty sad to see some of them go. And I went ahead and counted. We've got 113 trees in our inventory that are of a mature size. And so this is like 10% of our mature trees that we're taking down. So I don't want to like negate the fact that this is going to be a little traumatic for some people. Most people are interested in replanting in the spring, though. So this is just kind of what has to happen. We got to
Good.
get the old ones down before they hurt somebody and get new ones in. Does anybody have any questions?
These 2 owners who opted out,
Mm-hmm.
what are their options long term? I mean,
Their options long term are to honestly to probably pay more in the next round of removals. I don't think we'll get a bid this low again.
but at some point they have to take them down.
Yeah.
We have to take them down,
Mhm.
or we can.
One of them's an ash, and so I'm like
Oh,
almost positive
yeah.
it will be coming down next spring.
Okay, thank you.
But we're not. My philosophy on the tree board is not to force somebody to do something. It's to provide scientifically sound and financially attractive options that people willingly choose.
Yeah.
It's that's been working for us so far.
Well, thanks for your work on
Good
this.
work.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And so the chainsaws start tomorrow, is that right?
Yeah.
you go ahead and-
Projections, weather permitting, chainsaws start basically tomorrow or later this week.
Are the trees that are not coming down a danger to any of the neighbors' properties?
I don't believe so. No. I would be happy to share the list with you, but they're pretty spread out. There's 2 in a row down on like the 300 block of Kozer. But there's other mature trees in that area that are staying, so it'll create a little hole there, but it isn't going to be like a block that gets totally clear cut.
And then they're going to do the stump grinding by, I think you said November 15th.
Yeah.
And then that'll help you so that you can plant new trees,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
In similar areas.
Yeah. We usually don't go right in the same spot.
Right.
Try to move a few feet over, but Anything
Thanks so
else?
much for
Mhm.
all that work. That's a lot of work. Appreciate it. Now we'll go to public input. Would anyone like to come and speak to the council?
We do have ones.
Oh, we do have one on the list, so we might as well start with Alice. Welcome, Alice.
Alice Haugen, 1483 Grand Avenue, but I'm actually speaking on behalf of Erin Crocker, 1490 Grand Avenue, because she was not able to be here tonight. The contents of the Architectural History Survey by Tim Weitzel regarding 901 Melrose Avenue, which were reviewed at the last City Council meeting, were grossly misrepresented upon review by Mr. Haverkamp, with critical information from that report being withheld. Our entire community deserves to be made aware of the following direct quote from this report. Statement of significance. 901 Melrose Avenue is a cross-gabled building with alterations that date to after 1904 but before 1930. The building is recommended eligible for the National Register of Historic Places for criteria A, association with historic trends and the development of University Heights history, as well as for criteria C for architecture, end quote. This historically valuable structure will be demolished or relocated away from its site from local historical relevance, even though it is an important part of our small community's identity, history, and sense of place. Replacing this structure with a cookie-cutter franchise hotel, which by its very definition lacks originality or cultural value, is very clearly an irreversible mistake. By withholding this information, Mr. Haverkamp has demonstrated that he understands it to be wrong to replace a historic structure with a chain hotel. Sadly, knowing it is wrong led him to attempt to hide the results of the survey rather than to present the full picture of the decisions being made by council. Our community deserves to hear Mr. Haverkamp's reasoning for withholding this information. More importantly, we deserve to hear from each member of council regarding why your last vote would not warrant reconsideration now that our community has been made fully aware of this information. I'll add on my own part that I've known Jim Haverkamp for a long time, and it may well have been an inadvertent omission, but either way, it would probably be good to have an explanation.
Okay.
I know we don't typically respond as council, but I had no intention of trying to mislead anybody about this. And as a former president of Friends of Historic Preservation in Iowa City, I am not a person who by nature would do that. I do want to say, though, even though it is not in his report, Tim did say to me in an email, there is no direct connection of the history of this house or its architecture to University Heights, its periods of significance, or its history of development. Staub may well turn out to be a historic figure, but most of its history was not complete as of 50 years ago. It's unclear what changes to the building that Staub initiated, or more to the point, how the building shaped the work of Staub. It's unclear if Staub is significant in the local history beyond that of other citizens of University Heights. So yes, it is a significant structure in and of its architectural design, and I certainly recognize that Tim also mentioned in his report has been significantly altered, especially along the porch lines. I would imagine if I neglected to say that, it was mostly because I was thinking about what Tim had sent me in his email, and I certainly had no intention of misleading anybody about the historic significance of that structure.
One of the problems is when the residents have something to read and they make their judgments based on what's made public, and you have some private information, it's very annoying to hear, well, you really don't have all the information and I do, therefore I can say what I want to say. That's contrary to what the public information is. It's not a position I know, Mike, you want to be in. So I would suggest that if you have information that you're basing decisions on, you make it all public.
Would anyone else like to speak to the council? Yes. You want to step up and give your name and address?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Kyle Vogel. I'm president of Keystone Property Management. I'm here kind of representing Grandview Court Condominium Owners Association, but also I sit on the Greater Iowa City Apartment Association board. So thank you for allowing me to say a couple words. I'm here obviously on behalf of the memo that was presented to you guys by Stan Laberman in regards to some upcoming potential changes to your zoning and housing ordinance as a means of offsetting occupancy changes due to state law. First off, Stan did a great job. Most of what he has put together we are pretty comfortable with. Things like using the International Housing and Building Code is something we've been asking Iowa City to do for a long time, so it'd be nice to see some of that implemented. There are three areas we're a little concerned about. The first is the adding a definition of rooming houses to be any rental property occupied by 4 or more students. This goes really far in changing what the established legal definition of a rooming house is. I mean, legally, the definition of a rooming house is individual rooms rented within a property with individual leases between those residents for an individual room with common areas. It's not really what a single-family residence is rented as. Traditionally, a rooming house is a completely separate line of definition versus a single family common, like, common residency type definition. So I'm just hoping that at least as part of that process that maybe we can work on somehow figuring out how that's going to play with what state law defines under 562A as rooming houses and under what state law for the Iowa Landlord Tenant Code defines as a rooming house versus what's been presented as a possible change. The second thing we're somewhat concerned about is the parking changes. As Grandview Court would tell you, they only have 1.5 parking spaces per condo unit there. So to establish a rule that says for every person over the age of 18 in a rental property has to have a parking space would mean that none of those 2 bedrooms at Grandview could be rented. So we would just hope that there'd be some clarification on how that parking rule would be implemented for existing rental properties, especially for the condos there. I also don't know, I'm not familiar with this condo association or how many parking spaces are provided per, but in instances of a 2-bedroom, even if there's 2 spaces currently set aside, I mean, it's not unheard of to have 3 people sharing a 2-bedroom, whether that's a couple and a roomer or, so we just hope that that can somewhat be clarified as you guys work through this process with Stan. Third, of course, is the rental permit cap. Obviously, that's a concern for us in Iowa City. It's also a concern for us here. That 30% number that's been put out there is not a horrible number, but it does put into question, are you creating a monopoly for current rental owners, which for my clients, it's not a bad deal. It means that we don't have any new competition for people coming in, but it does mean that you are putting a limit on what people can utilize their properties for when they're selling their properties. I know there are some legal challenges in Tennessee and Minnesota, and I know the ACLU nationally has gotten into that discussion and fight as far as, putting rental caps on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. So I don't know where this is going to move forward, but we obviously just wanted to kind of present our concerns ahead of time, and that was it. So,
Excuse
hopefully-
me.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear, and I appreciate you being clear on where you represent. Are you representing Grandview or Keystone?
Well, both. I'm representing obviously Keystone. We have 14, I think, rental properties in University Heights that we manage for, I want to say 8 different owner groups.
Yeah, that's fine.
Most of those are Grandview Court. We do have 3 single-family homes here in the area, 4 single-family homes in the area as well. So, and then I also am here representing Grandview as far as our concerns, just making sure that Grandview Court's, I think, 40% owner occupied. So at a 60% rental level, anything like a 30% rental permit cap would be concerning. Now, I know in Iowa City, and that may have been Stan's intention too, I know in Iowa City that was only going to apply to single-family and duplexes of, I think, 3 or more bedrooms.
So, but be clear, the rental permit cap and the parking changes are Grandview concerns.
Sure.
And the initial one is a Keystone concern.
Well, I would say all 3 are concerns for everybody, but yeah, absolutely.
Because they're in,
The parking concern and the rental cap concern absolutely would be a concern of the association. As
yes,
far
okay,
as that goes. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Are you going to be able to stay during the meeting when the discussion?
I was not planning on it, and I know tonight's just an initial.
I see.
I got to get him home.
I see.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that, one of the things we've had a really good chance with the Greater Iowa City Apartment Association is the fact that we've had multiple meetings with the city as part of that process to build the ordinance. We hope that, when you guys are starting that process, that hopefully one of you will reach out to us. I think Sylvia, you're the head of zoning committee, I think, for the city, as far as the website says. We'd be happy to sit down, whether as, Chris Vilhauer is our president with Southgate. So, he or I or any of us would be happy to sit down and work through these things. And we have a great relationship with Stan, so we're happy to sit down with him at any time.
Okay.
Too, so.
Good.
Kyle, quick question. Does Grandview have any homeowner association restrictions on occupancy that we're not aware of?
It does not. Not at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the council? Okay, we'll go on. First is One University Place construction report and updates, and I see Jeff is here and Glenn submitted a report. Are there any questions for Glenn about his report? Jeff, did you have anything new to report? Any new commercial?
Just a couple of items. There's nothing else new commercial that we can talk about yet.
Okay.
We're excited about a lot of the activity levels that are picking up. Some sales activity we're excited about in the back building. As we get a little closer to the end of the construction, I think our traffic and really the interest is starting to take its move now. So we're real excited about that. Construction-wise update, we're still on schedule. We're pushing internal, external. The weather has just been doing a wonderful job. Grading, landscaping is on hold. We're going to delay our sodding until late in the year, which is not too much longer, but we're waiting for this little cooler weather and a little better setting. So there's landscaping plans ready to go in. There's some plantings that have been done that have been rejected or being pulled out and replaced. There are some things that we're a little bit concerned about on the current landscaping plan on the east side of the building. The top of the ravine slope and the sidewalk that's going around the building. We're calling for a number of white pines to be planted in that area, and all of the plant people are telling us there's just no room for a white pine to be able to mature there, so we're going to continue the white pines as they're designed, and there are a couple of other alternative ideas that they're presenting, and that we'll want to present those to council, and we'll get that to Glenn as well for his understanding and consideration. But on the east side of the building with the sidewalk where it's at, within a short period of time we'll be encroaching over the sidewalk and pushing up into the catalpa trees and the walnut trees that are in there. So there's some extra thought being put into that. We know we have our screening issues to our neighbors to the east, that we want to be very sensitive to that. Automobile headlights, we're going to give particular attention to that new design, and then we'll be able to present that to council as well. Construction-wise, we're very anxious to finish up the exterior work on both the front and the back side of the building. Macoma Cecina tells me that by mid-November, we're still talking 1st of November, targeting occupancy, initial preliminary occupancy. There's several different things in the site that are yet to be done. Josiah and I have met. The stone on the inappropriate left turns that are being made is not my particular stone of choice, so give me a little bit of time to replace that one with something that's got a little bit more character, a little more size to it, but it is there. I said I would get it there. The signage, Jake promised me yesterday that signage would be installed today, and I don't know whether it was weather related or whatever, but the additional signage that's supposed to go out on our exit ramp is not in place as it was supposed to be, but it will be before the end of the week, I'm sure. The grading in the back of the building that is had all of its black dirt placement now, it's being proposed. Judy Joyce met with us and suggested that a particular low maintenance type grass be planted in that area. It's only mowed once or twice a year. We'll be able to mow paths through that. It will be seeded this fall and get a nurse crop on it to get it covered with green yet this fall, but the first real growing season for that plant material will be next spring. And there'll be some additional landscaping that's not shown on any plans, but we're reviewing all of that with the University of Iowa. It's their property, and as always, they've just been great neighbors to work with as well. So we'll be coming up with a landscaping plan that's kind of outside of our initial scope, but compatible with what the university is hoping to do and get it reforested and back to green. So any questions that I could answer for anyone?
What type of commercial activity are you seeing for the first, for the front building? I've got residents asking how we're doing with procuring some amenities in that area.
The original amenities that we've always talked about are still the target. We're not straying from that in any way, shape, or form. I believe our our hopes for a small local grocer, I believe, is probably not going to happen. We've pushed that in about every direction that we can. But, we're certainly very hopeful that coffee shops, other similar topics and uses that we've discussed in the past is still our target, and we'll stay there until we get them.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you are not settling on the first offer for something that's not related to any of those usage?
We have had to reject some uses, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much
thank
for
you.
coming. Okay, now we revisit, reconsider, and rescind rezoning of Flom property. Jerry asks that this be on the agenda. Jerry?
Thank you, Louise. Yes, I did. The outcome in the process was quite surprising to me, and I've been thinking about it regularly and hearing about it from residents regularly. And the irrationality may not be so much in outcome, though, because the outcome might be a possible way the community might want to go after reasonable deliberations and considerations and data gathering. But the timing of it seems irrational given all the unknowns that were pointed out by many residents. And I think we should reconsider it because it's left a very bad taste in many people's mouths. It left a bad taste in my mouth because it was an outcome that I was told was going to happen by one of the developers only weeks after we were notified about the proposal and well before there was any real consideration of it. I can't tell you the exact date. I could if I looked at my calendar, but it was that lunch I talked about when Greg Stiltner told me that the four counselors that ended up voting for it were going to vote for it, and I was the only holdout. And it's that predictability that also gives me pause about the vote. I think it's irrational, and I think it needs reconsideration because it was a poke in the eye of a very determined and committed and I think well-meaning zoning commission report that voted against it. I think it was a stick in the eye to Kent Ralston and his group when he said that they could gather the data, not only about the impact of that kind of commercialization, but also extend, I would hope they could extend that study to the impact of now potentially 2 hotels within a very short stretch of Melrose Avenue. And Kent also said that they could study and report back to the council the real attitudes of the residents, not only those that showed up here, that showed up in numbers that were much larger against the rezoning than for it. And one wonders, and I wonder, what a larger sample would be, that a sample built on those that may not like to come to meetings but have their views anyway. And then it also was, the council passed on all of that, and they also passed on letting the voters speak, which would entail another month or two of finding out really how the voters felt about this very important development in the city. It just seemed irrational. The timing, the rush to do this seemed irrational. And what I've heard back from more residents than I've heard back about any other item is, why can't we reconsider this? And more importantly, maybe more importantly, after the election, what can be done about it? And the developer doesn't want that problem if there are problems to be made, and we certainly don't. So I think what Kent offered is a more specific plan, more specific insights into what the residents might want in terms of an integrated community with some commercial and residential. And if that's potentially available, why not wait for it? We gave more well-considered database discussion to the chicken ordinance than we did to the building of this hotel. And nobody on the council, not nobody, none of my fellow councilors deemed it important to gather these data, as one said, because of the opportunity. Well, let's see what the residents think about the opportunity. Let's give them a chance to speak. Let's reconsider the vote. Let's rescind the amendment and move on past the elections. I move to do so.
There's a motion on the table
What's the motion?
to rescind.
To reconsider and rescind the amendment to, I think it's 208, right?
I think it's 208.
Yep.
So the zoning ordinance has been changed by that vote. If you want to if you want to revise that, if you want to change it back, you kind of have to go through the process of amending amending the zoning ordinance. It means you have to publish notice of a hearing, you have to have a public hearing, and you have to have a vote. So if you want me to publish that, I'll be happy to. You need to do it at a regular council meeting. You can't be done in a special meeting, at least the hearing. If you stretch votes into special meetings, that's permissible, but not the public hearing.
I would ask you to do so. Thank you.
Council want to discuss if they want to agree or disagree or make some statements.
Jerry, I'll disagree with you on this, and I think that your comment that we studied the chickens more carefully and closely than we did this is really not accurate, because we had multiple reports about this project and we had specific reports about this project. And I think that, as I said at the last meeting, one of the things that is hard in our community is that with our current 2-year term, by the time you get a new council up to speed and in place, we're always ahead of an election. I think the fact that we've been dealing with this issue for nearly a year, I think that looking at the fact that many of us on the council that are not in their first term, this is the third, if not the fourth, potential project that has been presented before us, given the fact that many people talk about a lot of concerns such as traffic and everything else, and we're suggesting other proposals that all had higher traffic volumes. I think that this was a wise decision on the part of this council that took many things into consideration and certainly wasn't a quick jump into anything.
My concern is, as stated, Mike, we had no data, no reports on what the potential impact of one hotel, much less two hotels, was on the community when we had the opportunity to get some of that information, and we had no detailed information or extensive information on what the residents wanted and how they felt about this. And my point remains, we had more focused, relevant data on the chicken ordinance than we did on this.
Actually, let me speak to the chicken ordinance, because that was, I was the key sponsor on that, and as I recall, you opposed the chicken ordinance on the, I can't remember your basis, but at the end of the day, there was no data. There was comparison of a model of an ordinance from a number of jurisdictions that have already passed a chicken ordinance similar, and I just thought it would be proactive for us to go in that direction, in particular because there was residential support for it. And I told you demographically the support came from families who want to raise their children with certain values regarding food, and of adults who have no families, who have food safety concerns that they want to manage in their homes. So with respect to property rights and reasonable use and encumbrances on that, you're a lawyer, you understand what it means to be reasonable. So that's the chicken story. Now, with respect to the hotel, I hear what you have to say, and I've already spoken at great lengths with respect to what considerations went into casting my vote
at the last council meeting and the council meeting before that. It was by no means an easy vote, but it was a vote that reflected consensus among a very diverse body of counselors. There was no one counselor who agreed on one approach, and we had to arrive at a consensus, including yourself, which you opted out not to participate. But the point is that we need to be conscientious of the types of plans that that property has been eliciting. Before this, if you go back to the record, you have another realtor who spoke sometime in the first quarter of 2016 proposing another development. That development was for 120 rental units, apartments, all to be developed by one particular developer. Do you remember? He came in, and I think he spoke to all of council individually, and he never came back because there was no consensus from council to have that proceed. Next, you have the other developer from Chicago who had a 500-bed dormitory proposed for that area. Again, we had another town hall meeting where the community loudly and clearly said, we don't want student housing in this property. This hotel is totally different. It is completely different in terms of its demographic reception within the city. It is completely different from the hazards and positives that it presents from any of the other prior developments that have been proposed. And we have, at least I have paid attention closely to the number of meetings that have taken place with zoning. You know, I just don't see, Jerry, how we could have gotten a better deal and consensus making in this transaction. Just look at Iowa City. A week ago, they gave away $8 million in TIF to build 2 buildings in the downtown area. This transaction here has 0 TIF attached to it. The Staub House, which has sentimental and potential historical value, that's been salvaged for the city to take next steps as a community and figure out what to do. It means that the city now has to take ownership for that vision and figure out what to do with it. With respect to other factors, we have done exactly what the zoning commission identified as negatives and turned them into positives and left additional discussion pieces for the next council to tackle, such as comprehensive plan amendments to reflect what does it mean to have a residential character and a sense of place. That can't be solved by you, myself, Jim Lane, Dottie, or Mike Haverkamp in the next 60 days. We don't have enough time. That requires a community discussion and something that we need to look into. At the end of the day, what you're suggesting is nothing more than a delay tactic, waiting for everyone else to make decisions, for the university to make decisions, for Iowa City to make decisions, for Coralville to make decisions. Everyone except University Heights gets to make a decision. So that's why we get the short end of the stick of any proposal. We get the crumbs of projects around the area because we're not prepared as a council to make a logical, incentive-driven type of decision for a long-term strategic view for our community. Not just a short-term, not just a small group decision, but a decision that cuts across through 15 streets that make up our city.
Are you done?
No.
I didn't think so. Go ahead.
Now I'm done, Jerry.
First of all, your comment about a delay tactic just denigrates everything else you said. It's polarizing, it's nonsensical to say something's a delay tactic when it's what more residents came in here to talk to those points than any other points. What you're calling a delay tactic is
revitalization.
Well, yeah, just from a matter of aesthetics.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Community comments. So Josiah, what do you know about that issue?
I mean, I don't have anything to add. I haven't done research into that, but I mean, it's not rocket science. Everybody knows that, you know, if you don't want to look at polls, then
don't put them up.
Then don't put them up. But
well spoken, like an engineer, Josiah.
So,
well, the cost.
Probably some details.
Yeah.
And
Can we do that?
So one thing I would remind you of is that the council sometime this year, reached an agreement with Mid-American Energy to renew its franchise
Yeah.
for electrical transmission. And there are at least a couple of places in that franchise ordinance where Mid-American is required to at least consider going underground and presenting the city with the cost and talking about payment of that cost. So the city's, I guess, the council's already on record as saying we would prefer to have things go underground. That's just, I guess, a reminder.
What would be very interesting if, with this windfall money, if this motel gets built, that we have a plan to put all of the wires and communications underground and get a budget for that and do it right.
That's a big part of the price tag on the Melrose project right now.
Yeah.
On the lower end is burying all the utilities,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's a great start. I mean,
Right.
do your arterials first, and
Right.
yeah.
So it sounds to me like we've got consensus
Yeah.
to start with a policy that says everything underground, and now do we go as far as saying no more poles whatsoever unless they are Mid-Am related, which is your cable and your electrical, or do we permit a special exception for a pole? I'm okay with saying just utility. I mean, people need their cable, their electrical and broadband, and okay. So Steve, looks like we'll go for Coralville.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay.
Chris, would you like to give your report?
Sure, I sent out the updated building and rental permit spreadsheets. One thing I want to point out on the clerk report, I'm sure you all saw it because you just pour over that report when I send it out, but I appreciate that. Under the rental permits section, you're going to see a new line for this month. I am designating what are permits for One University Place in addition to Grandview and the rest of the city.
Any questions for Chris? Thank you. We'll go to Jim Lane.
What
and-
type of vendor information did you get, Chris?
The Rachel, and I'm not even going to try and say her last name, she was requesting vendor information for 2016, 17,
Yeah.
16, and it was vendor name, address, what we paid, how much we paid, check number. Am I?
Yeah, basically every bill we paid last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was
For
the
all departments or just a few departments?
For the city,
For all
everything.
bills.
What the
Open
request
records
was.
request.
Right, from American Transparency in Baton Rouge,
That's the
Florida.
second one we've gotten from them.
Correct. They asked for salaries last time, and this time it was for vendor information, which Lori compiled, and I thank her.
So anyone who's really itching to see it,
No.
it's on the webpage. We don't post. We just post. That was part of our public records. We post every records request that we have and who they are and what they ask for. So she's asked for 2.
Okay, so we'll go on to,
I think it's Papa Vasilopoulos.
okay, we'll go on to
I say
Jim,
Rachel.
I'm glad. it wasn't mine.
FY17 budget review.
Yeah, just my annual review, and we had it for the last meeting, and Mike will go back because he didn't put it on this attachment. But basically, what I compare it to is where we started and where we ended up. We do the mid-year, well, not the mid-year, the 2/3 year correction to get it right. But I like to go back to the beginning. We budgeted a deficit of about 14,000, and we came out with a deficit of about 6 in total. It's very confusing this year because we picked up $295,000 in bond revenue, which is in which is in the 16-17 budget, but we didn't spend the money till this year. So Steve and Lori are going to be working on that, plus some other numbers to reflect better how the budget will look for this year.
Steve Cool.
Steve Cool, yes. Yeah. And I suggested last year we look at the 2 fiscal years together because we had over $100,000 in building permits last year due to OUP, or in the previous year. And so if you look at the 2 years in total, there was a total surplus, 6,000 minus and 88,000 plus, of about 41,000 per year. So I felt like a good budget period, and we managed the cost well, especially with the community center coming on board and the things we had to do here. We did issue really 1,245,000 in bonds.
That's a magnitude you're not used to dealing with.
No,
Our,
yeah, and we paid off our 10-year bond of about 240,000 in that year. So the new debt capacity, I did get a new number since I published this report back in September, is 6,180,000. So we're about 20% utilization. I listed places where we were above and below. I think public safety, a big item, always for ours, which is a large part of the budget, was under budget by 20,000, which was pretty significant. For next year, we expect to be at a surplus of 12.9, and we'll continue to hold our reserves at the 25% range. So. I think that's pretty strong. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We have the treasurer's report, and Lori sent the new list of warrants. Is there any other additional ones, Lori?
yeah, on the it already is. It's on the finance page.
Oh, Brad.
Yep.
Brad's
One.
check.
Just one. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so Brad's check.
Yeah. It
Did you
needs to
say
be at
150?
250.
250.
One event. Yeah.
One event,
Okay.
okay. That's what's added.
That's what's added.
So the warrants are all before you. Is there any objection to paying them? Hearing none, the warrants will be paid by unanimous consent. Anything else for Lori or anything? We'll go on to police chief report, and Chris had sent around a written report. Chris?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to the written report. Do you, how do you want to go about the parking ticket consideration?
Actually, I have a question on your written report.
Okay.
I'd like to know litigation matters that are occurring in UHPD, that they be added to this report, just for purposes of having visibility as to what's going on in your department. I know that Jerry and Dottie help manage that, but I think the rest of the council is just as responsible for UHPD as the two committee members. So I'd like to know what litigation matters are pending, whether they relate to traffic violations or not. So I'd like to see that included as a line item going forward. So can you tell me a little bit for this report period for October, what we're looking at in terms of litigation matters?
Yeah, I mean, just what was in the Press Citizen. No.
That was one. The other one is small claims. Is it small claims or ticket litigation or traffic court litigation?
What do you?
I think Sylvia's including just the routine prosecution of traffic matters. I don't have any idea presently what.
You want to know like how many are?
Mm-hmm. How many are pending?
I'd have to look. Maybe 4 have been like simple misdemeanors want to go to trial.
Okay. And there's some.
And I'd have to pull up a list of that.
Can we get this in a memo form?
Yeah.
Chris, please.
That's what I think Sylvia, you just asked, be included. Okay.
Right, included, and if he has a recap right now to tell us.
You just want to know, I guess it's not always, many cases say, hey, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth in like an OWI prosecution. What, you want to know the ones that are?
I just want to know the ones that are opened or initiated during the reporting period. So if in October you had 5 of them.
So,
that
so
were-
for example,
Mhm.
I think one of the things Chris is saying is officers issue 40 citations, 35 of them plead by paper, sign something, and pay their fine. 5 of them plead not guilty. Okay, 5 of them are set for trial, but 3 of them don't don't proceed to trial for various reasons, so actually two of them.
That would be fine if you want to set up a table like that, sure.
Well, I'm just asking what you, so that you can direct Chris in terms
Well,
of what you want.
let's start off with what you've proposed, and we'll work from that information, and we'll,
But just there were either or options in there, just the ones that are going to trial.
how about if I spend some time with you and you walk me through what the process looks on your end, and I'll tell you what I think would be a good reportable tabular
Okay,
type of
sure, sure.
situation. That way, the rest of council is kept aware of what's going on in that realm of the world. Okay, thank you.
Chris, was my parking ticket on your report? I didn't get
No,
to
I
open
didn't
your
put
report.
anything on there about it.
Okay, very good.
You want to start with consideration to dismiss parking ticket? Now, this was
It's not Jerry's, is it?
No,
No.
this is the Shemansky.
This was Shemansky.
It's the Shemansky, and you might have you have the letter. I don't know, but anyway.
That was in last month's.
You know, it was
Yeah.
Right.
a letter, and
Yeah.
Mr. Shemansky was here during the special meeting and
Yeah.
during the other meeting, and
Well, again, maybe it'll be easier if I go with the second point before the first point on there. Just
Oh.
that,
okay.
just that ordinance 120, this section, I'd have to pull that up, but it's the section covering parking tickets and how they're dismissed. We've talked about this before. The ordinance itself requires that only the city council can be the one to appeal the ticket once it's issued, by filing a written notice of appeal with the city clerk within 20 days.
Would council be
That's-
interested in changing?
Yeah, that's the reason this is, I guess, before you.
That's why we're deciding on a $35 parking ticket. And would council be interested in changing that?
Steve, do we have to change it, or can the council just delegate Chris to do it?
No, I think you should change it. It's in the ordinance, the procedure, the way Chris said.
So you actually need to amend the ordinance, you mean?
Are you interested in that?
I think we should do what we have to do to amend it.
And what are we amending for?
So that they don't have to come through the city council the way
Oh, I
the
see.
ordinance is
Mhm.
worded.
Got it. Mhm.
Every citation.
I just think the citations that the city officials get should come through council. So Chris is under no pressure.
That's a fair exception, just so that
There's
not an
independence.
awkward power situation.
Is that,
Conflict.
is that good?
Yeah, the other amendment, there is a safe harbor for a service vehicle. What Mr. Shemansky said was, look, I was working on my property, I was doing construction on my own property. And what the ordinance says is, well, if you work for Jim's Construction, and it says that on your truck, and you've got a permit to do your construction, which he said he had,
Yeah.
well, then you're exempt, you can park on the yard during the time you're doing construction. And so, I don't know, I'm assuming the officer
Did he have a
said, well,
permit?
he said he had a building permit.
So I guess my side of it is that we received one or two complaints from neighbors about the truck. I don't believe the truck had any sign on it that said it was with the construction company. So it was just, okay, here's a truck parked in the backyard, and that's why a ticket was issued.
Right, and I think his view, his information was that he was doing the work himself, so yeah, it didn't say anything on the side. And I'm saying maybe that's a defect in the ordinance, if we're gonna amend it about where appeals or how appeals are held, maybe that would be a reasonable amendment too. Although I suppose it could be, well, I mean, if the person has a construction permit, I think that's your test.
That's the
right?
threshold, yeah.
I believe it's building 17007 for him.
But I think that truck was there a lot longer
Yeah,
than the construction.
I think if you got a neighborhood report that it was probably crawling into the nuisance category.
Yeah, I ended
I'd
up,
make no assumptions about that.
Well,
I ended up talking to a couple different neighbors who said that the truck was there for a long time before they ever called, and it was there a long time. And I know you didn't. I don't think the city moved on it the day that the calls came in either, even. So it sat quite a while. So
And did you explain what the city's position was? You got a complaint from the neighbor.
Yeah, as I was
So-
saying, I received one or two complaints. It did basically what Mike said.
I
It's
see.
been there a while. It's sitting in the backyard, or side yard. It's kind of not attractive. So
So I'm hearing Mike and Dottie say they want to.
I'm not in interest. I think it should stand.
The ticket should
Yeah,
stand.
I
The
do too.
citations should stand.
I would support that as well.
Yeah.
And Sylvia.
Chris, what's your opinion?
I think based on the length of time and the complaints we got, it was a justified ticket.
Okay.
Okay, so it's consensus by council, majority of council that the ticket citation stands.
I would just say I would take Chris's very well reasoned word for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I might say that if it's timely, I've had several city officials from surrounding cities talk to me about Chris, and it's been nothing but glowing and positive, and it's been
Yeah.
really a wonderful experience to hear that about our police chief.
Thanks, Jerry.
Very, very true. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess one question you should probably address is, since currently the ordinance says you're the only ones that can waive it or not, could you grant him an exception for the extra $5 fine every 30 days that the ticket's late because
Yes,
meetings have
we
been
can
going
waive
on?
that. I'm fine with waiting that. He just pays the
I mean, he
original
intended
amount.
to
I mean,
deal with it when it came up.
and
so-
we put him off twice. So
Yeah.
So, and then that answers most of my question about parking enforcement. I guess I also wanted to just quickly get the council's sense on parking enforcement generally. It's, we have so many problems with game day parking. It's very clear why we have parking enforcements. There's also this tension between residents parking in front of their house, not feeling as though they deserve a ticket because it's their neighborhood, they're paying taxes, it's their house, and then the people that work nearby or come to games and don't live here, that kind of thing. I guess I don't know what position to take on this. I'm wondering if the council has a position, whether there should be more leniency to residents and non-residents, if that's something you're even willing to address. If you don't want to talk about it, I can just deal with it, but it's a tension and it's unclear where you guys want me to go with that.
You want the police committee to?
So there's some legal considerations that
Yeah.
you can't treat people differently based on what they're
Yes.
addressing. If you want, without taking action to do that sort of officially, there have been some times in the past when the council has discussed town-wide permitting, like
Right.
neighborhoods do in cities.
Yeah.
Those didn't really, no, I don't think we ever did that, but that was discussed. That would be a way of saying, if you're a resident here and you pay taxes here and you go through a permitting process and you have your little sticker, then you can park maybe in different times for locations than just somebody who's not in those categories. But without doing that, it's a pretty easy legal answer. You can't treat people differently.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess that's what I wanted to get at, in that when you amend this ordinance, if you're going to do that, to take away that the city council is the one making that choice, I just wanted a verbal backing that that's
Yeah.
how it has to be done, basically.
Jerry, did they allow overnight parking on Grand?
No.
No, I was going to say you and I are the only ones on streets that don't even allow overnight parking, which given
Marietta doesn't either.
doesn't allow nobody has overnight. I thought you guys could park overnight.
No,
All right.
there's not.
My bad. My bad. All right,
No.
never mind. I mean, if they don't allow overnight anywhere, then and I think
You're not
I
a
mean,
second-class citizen
okay.
with it, Mike. so anyway.
Hey, they put parking meters in front of my old house, so I mean, I think this is all pretty nice. But, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that if it's a case where, gosh, I've got somebody staying from out of town, if you're a resident, you approach the police and say, hey, is it okay if we leave our car overnight? I think that's absolutely acceptable. If it's a very occasional item and somebody contacts the police, that's what I've told my neighbors to do in those kind of cases.
I think that's what the practice
Yeah.
it often comes down to.
Yeah.
Chief Stanley gave us parking,
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So I don't mind. I don't mind people enforcing the parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted the council.
I do.
Apparently, Jerry gets. You got a ticket, Jerry?
Can I speak to this?
No. Sure.
So Jerry, you could use my tactic. When I was on council, I reduced the police budget by the percentage or the dollar amount of the ticket that I got for the year. So whatever they asked for, it was automatically $30 or $40 less
There
for my
you
parking
go.
tickets. One thing I would caution is I've seen it on my street where residents have been given permission to park, and I don't have a problem, if they're having work done on their house and they get permission to park. It's just confusing to me to watch the same person pull up in scrubs and walk to the hospital. If you're a resident, I don't understand how you got a parking pass to park in front of my house for the day. So I think people are really tricky about it. They may even be selling parking at their house, and yeah, they have a legitimate reason that
I think that's true.
that they can't have them park at their house. But at the same point, I wonder why we have to make provisions for them to have them park in front of my house very close to my driveway when my teenage son backs out of there and gives me a heart attack. So that's just a point, and the sob that parks in front of my house right now. Chris and I have a very good working relationship. I call him all the time on parking issues, but I don't know. It's interesting to see what people feel is their right to park when it says 1 hour parking. So tough stuff.
Thank you. Then you wanted to talk about, did you cover that enough for the parking enforcement?
I think so. We take payment for parking tickets and Marietta parking passes. I was just requesting that the council allow us to have, I don't know, say $100 for a cash drawer that would be broken down into small bills, that would just be maintained and recorded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that agreeable?
Absolutely.
For the,
We've
you
had
mean
that
the
before.
spaces
So they
for
can
the
make-
splash pad for town court?
No, they're talking about making change.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a change drawer.
Drawer,
Change your
cash.
Okay.
when they sell the parking.
You done, Chris? Almost done?
Almost done. The very last one was, so we have part-time officers in the past. We've maintained the part-time officers, which puts a lot of time and effort and cost into maintaining their training, even though they're working at another agency, having them come to meetings and everything. The University of Iowa just has mutual aid agreements and memorandums of understanding with other cities and municipalities that their officers can come. The university will then reimburse that city for the time of that officer. It'll probably take a lot of steps with legal to actually get down that road to get those mutual aid agreements, but I wonder if the council is okay with moving forward on that approach. Not necessarily that we have less part-time officers or get rid of the ones we have now, but I think getting more help on game days when needed with mutual aid would be beneficial.
I think that's a good idea.
I think if the budget isn't increased, it would be a good idea.
Have you followed up with the athletics department? I know that Wally had, and I think the last comment from Wally was we could ask for whatever we needed, and I think that would be a fine idea to reach out to athletics to see if we can start with a mutual aid group, a mutual aid agreement with them, since it is their activities that are causing the football traffic on our end.
Well,
Well-
what Chris and I worked on this late summer before football was communicating with them, and they have been cleaning up the traffic and coming through University Heights,
Yeah.
and it's been a really good relationship. You've been included in meetings and been working with that, and it's a big
Yeah.
improvement there.
They're really great on that end, but they bring in officers for the stadium for their event.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking for a separate thing that
Yeah.
we bring officers during game days. I guess I don't quite follow how asking them for mutual aid would help. 'Cause
No,
really
I
it's from
think-
the outside
I
agents
think
that
what-
need help.
What I'm saying is expand the scope of what they bring their officers for, on the theory that we're right next to them. It's all of the traffic that is asking for the request. If it wasn't related to athletics, we wouldn't be knocking at their door asking for some of their guys from wherever they come to come and help us shore up your team.
Well, I think those are maybe a part of the kind of agreement that
But it's with
that
athletics, right?
no,
They
that
Don't they come
Chris is
to
talking
University
about,
Heights?
because the university reaches
Yeah.
out throughout the state for
Oh,
all kinds of
sure.
agreements.
That's what
So,
I
so
see
Dot, I
when
just
I'm
want to be clear.
No, they do.
Not just with Iowa City or with Coralville or with a city. I'm saying, look to the athletics department for a mutual aid group as well. Think expansively. That's what I'm asking
Well,
for.
I think they probably already do, or that would be an understanding.
Are you asking for mutual aid or money?
They help us a lot. They have officers for traffic enforcement within the city. I think we already have a 218E agreement, 2080 with the university or with the state for that. We do with most agencies in Johnson County.
I have another question relating to the football days. Iowa City comes out the day before and puts those trash buckets all the way down Melrose. Would that be possible for us to arrange to have those also placed on Melrose in University Heights on a football day to, try to get rid of some of the debris?
Didn't Amy Moore do that? Amy and Doug?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm the guy that puts those trash cans out.
Okay.
Other duties as assigned for Iowa City, yes. So
There you go.
I get to drive the truck, though. Tim gets to walk. That is paid for by the vendors. The vendor fees for the commercial vendors that set up along Melrose contribute, and then that money is used to put out trash cans through that neighborhood and then down Melrose Court.
Is it a voluntary contribution or part of the license fee?
You need a temporary use permit
Yeah.
to set up in Iowa City on, the residential property for game days, and that fee is used for trash.
Okay. Because I know how much Paul Moore has to work to try to clean up down around there by his place, and I thought it would be
he puts like 16 or 18 of his own trash cans.
Yes.
Around his property. Now, were you finished yet? I know we keep interrupting here.
Well, I guess I don't know.
Oh, the mutual
Just the
aid.
mutual aid. If there's council consensus that I could move forward with Steve to see if we can.
Why don't we explore it and see
And-
what's
In
possible?
particular, I'm talking about certain officers who have worked here in the past now work for another agency, and instead of hiring them as part-time officers, which involves a certain amount of work, just mutual aid with the department they're working for
you're thinking
now,
of, say,
so they
Nick?
can come back. Nick's hired as part-time, right? But yeah, exactly. That would be the example.
So then, under the mutual aid agreement, would there be compensation paid to the other city or not, or is that
I guess it would depend on what's worked out. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
I'd be interested in seeing what the terms are, because mutual aid means that if you're tapped to be of assistance at some time, that may leave our city without any resources. It works in the utility world where, like right now, Puerto Rico
They're-
is drawing from a lot of.
They're very specific, the mutual aid
It's
agreement.
very specific.
Well, it is specific, but I'd like
Well-
to know where that leaves us if we get asked to reciprocate the mutual aid.
I read the universities, and they don't say anything about going back. It's just this specific these days. You send us officers, we pay you back.
So
I
you're,
see.
so I hear Dottie, at least some are
Check it out.
interested in maybe you looking into it and
Yeah,
then
check it
coming
out.
back
Okay,
to
that's
council.
that's all I needed, just a first.
Okay.
Yeah.
go ahead.
Very good.
Okay, that's all I got.
One thing, I had been in touch with Chris about a ticket that I got when I was parked illegally when our house was being worked on to prepare for an event. And I said, and I let it go and let it go and let it go, as I'm wont to do. And anyway, it came time to appeal it, and I'm here. And if you want to deny the appeal, that's fine. The only grounds is the house was being worked on. The contractors needed access to the driveway and the house. I parked in the street. I didn't get the placard and certificate that I needed. I was really bad.
How much is the ticket?
I don't even know.
20.
20.
I think 20. So,
I'll pay it. Never mind.
okay.
If you're going to say the wedding, Jerry, you would have had me. If it had been the wedding.
It was that.
Sure,
But
sure.
I will not say it. I will pay it.
Thank you, Jerry. Does the committee have anything they'd like to add? Please?
No.
Okay.
No.
Then we'll go on to streets and sidewalks. Is there anything from?
Nothing except maybe Josiah's comment about when we're going to have the bus stop completed on the east side of Sunset.
Okay, so shall we just go to the engineer
Yeah.
report then? Okay, thank
I
you.
just like to,
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of walking along.
Well, Jerry, I have no desire to revisit this whatsoever. As I spoke in the last time, we have a good project, a very viable project. I'm not going to go into what everyone else has said on this thing. But the bottom line is, it's a $2.5 million piece of property that's going to be developed. Well, just to respond to that, doesn't mean that it has to be rezoned commercial for that to be responsible. That is the price tag. And as I pointed out in a previous meeting, that can be obtained through parking and through both football parking, 7-day parking, and rental of the house, of the residents. All of that will cash flow with a $2.5 million kind of project. Now, the other big elephant in the room is the university. Will they pay $2.5 million? I don't know. Probably not if we don't rezone this, but they're going to pay a pretty good price regardless. But anyway, people, you keep talking about, when the impact. Jerry, quite frankly, I heard dates that went from 4 months to 2 years on how long we ought to wait on this project from the group. They want to wait for the impact of the hotel and OUP. Well, that hotel is at least 2 years away. And then you're going to wait a little bit longer and a little bit longer to make sure what the impact is. So we need to move, and we need to move, I think, very quickly. This project also addressed the rental property concerns. We have an innovative program with the developer purchasing a couple of properties to donate, to move towards owner-occupied. So this has more pluses than just the hotel. And I think it will help the city a great deal. We'll move forward. We'll be able to move infrastructure projects up much quicker on the calendar. People talk about the hotel tax. There's still $200,000 per year in property tax that's going to come out of this thing for the hotel. So there is financial benefits, but I'm really keying on what folks have said about and what we're working on with beginning this innovative program for neighborhood revitalization of that area and the rest of the town.
And that's exactly it. This hotel tax is nothing more than the tool that the city needs to meet its current issues and demands, many of which are here. They're not going to wait 2 years to be contained. They're not going to wait until some other municipality makes decisions or they share their plans with University Heights, or we have occupancy traffic flowed patterned out with One University Place or the Convention Center. These are issues that are now, and we as a city don't have the resources to appropriately manage the scale that they represent. And I think our quality of a residential community is suffering as a result of that.
I think, Sylvia, that's the key reason that I also voted, because as is, we have a community in need of repair and restoration. And I want that focus to be on revitalization, trying to limit and reduce the rental properties and put them convert many of the buildings into properties that can be purchased by modest income families. And I'm on Streets and Sidewalks. Jerry, you're on Streets and Sidewalks. You know the condition our city is in. And we do need money for those kinds of infrastructure.
That's right. And not only that, but we have to also look a little bit more forward. Right around the corner is where we have to take a peek, because we now have the Swisher Track.
Correct.
The Swisher Track is now being professionally managed by a banking trust department.
And they've already broken down to the point where they're beginning to sell.
Correct. For $2.9 million to a Minneapolis
another
group. So
factor-
they're ready. They're on the table.
And another
Our-
factor.
don't you agree that our city needs
Yes,
to
I think
pursue?
that would be a great idea.
Right.
Because there we could have the trails and the green space that
Well,
everyone
we
is
can carry out
coveting.
what we said we were going to do in the Vision program in
Mhm.
2016, right,
Correct.
Lottie?
Correct.
It's a lot of work. It's going to need a lot of funding, and the problems are now. They're not 2 years later. They're not 3, or whenever Coralville or some other entity gets their action plan together. I think it's our turn as
Yeah.
a community.
I agree. I think
to move forward.
we're all collaborative and agreeing.
I just, this notion, and Jim raised it, and he raised it accurately, that some of the residents said 2 years, and that's what has been picked up on now. Ken Ralston said this report could be done probably within 6 months. So the 2 years is a red herring, really, and we could get information back about the impact of 1 hotel or 2 hotels and residential input within 6 months. So let's stop with the 2-year stuff, okay? That's, it's too reminiscent of what we hear all over the news. 6 months is where Kent Ralston was, or thereabouts. He wasn't that precise about it, but it was nowhere near 2 years. So there's a possibility, and there's a immediacy about an election in a month, where we will get a good indication of what the residents want and what is the council afraid of.
Jerry, I kind of interrupted your motion because Steve Ballard was explaining, and I think it'd be fair to, I wanted to see what the discussion was. I don't know if you want to make the motion, and which means involving amending ordinance 208, which would be a public input. So, I mean, do you want to make that motion?
I just moved to, I would make the motion to amend and to revert back to single residence zoning, R1.
So I think that from a process standpoint, the motion would be to, publish the notice to do that.
Yeah, it would be published in notice.
Okay. I think that's the motion.
Okay, is there a second? Is there a second for Jerry's motion? I don't hear one.
No, that's what I expected.
Alice, you wanted to speak? Thank you for coming up.
I had a question to the council. The plans for revitalization and so forth sound admirable. Is there a mechanism by which this council can bind future councils to use the money that way and not for tax relief?
Sorry, would you repeat that, Alice? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it all.
One of the goals of using the money from this project is to do redevelopment and home or ownership and various other good uses. Is there a mechanism by which this council can bind future councils to use the money that way and not for tax relief?
I think there is. I think we could set up a 501c3 for the community, separate from our current one, to receive the homes and that sort of stuff. But Steve may.
She's not asking about that.
Well, this binds the future, because I'm concerned about the proceeds from the sale of these things, that we continue to generate those. But Steve, you had a comment.
Yeah, so the ballot measure that the council adopted, the language that will be on the ballot on November 7th will say that 50% of the revenue,
That's right,
by law goes a certain way. And then the council has asked the community to provide that the other 50% would be used 90% for neighborhood housing and infrastructure revitalization, including road repairs, neighborhood stabilization, and parkland or green space acquisition, and the remaining 10% for any lawful purpose.
And Steve, wouldn't it be accurate to say that under neighborhood stabilization, the concept of Alice's tax relief for property owners could become a component, a policy component? Could be. I know that some cities.
I was talking about generalized tax relief,
Yeah.
just cutting the assessment rate.
Oh, I see. Well, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Louise, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Just so there's no misinterpretation and misrepresentation, I'm running in this council election because I was asked to run, and my major platform is going to be to see if we can could revise this ordinance now and get the zoning back to R1. I want everybody to know that. I'm going to be saying that. I'm going to be critical of my fellow councilors in rushing to that in a very opportunistic way. And we'll see how that comes. If the residents say, no, we're not going to vote for you, we want the hotel, so be it. And if they say it otherwise, I will represent them in doing whatever I can to see that this ordinance gets changed.
And because to level the playing field, I think Dottie and I deserve a 30-second showcasing of our platform, since you had yours. So I will start off by saying that it's a strategic opportunity. It is a business term that is used in the nonprofit world, government, and corporations to discuss situations where master plans or mission statements of an organization are neatly prepared, are squarely prepared, but an opportunity comes by that doesn't quite fit the parameters of that strategic parameters of that organization. So what do? They create flexibility as an organization to respond to the opportunity. So I consider that this is a strategic opportunity that provides many more pluses than the negatives that it presents. And because of that, that's why I stand by my vote respectfully before the community. So while you choose different terms, I call mine strategic opportunity, and I don't back down from it, Jerry. Thank you. Dottie, your turn.
I find that an opportunity that comes by not maybe once in a lifetime, but exceedingly rarely. And in order to rehabilitate and revitalize our community so that it's a happy residential community like the comprehensive plan had in mind, the assets and the benefits of the financial remunerations here cannot be matched. And this particular piece of land is not conducive for single-family dwellings or for expensive condominiums because, of its location by the railroad tracks, etc. So this is a perfect opportunity for everyone. It's a win-win. I can't see a negative. We've talked about it for a year. It's been mulled and munched over by everybody. And everyone has a position. So I guess we'll just see, who hits the finish line.
Would anyone else on council like to speak?
Could we move on?
Yeah.
There's going to be a candidates forum.
Next week, a week from tonight, October 18th. Thank you for putting that in.
No, I know.
Believe me, that was not my intent.
Let's move on.
So
Thank you.
We'll go on to the second consideration of ordinance 209.
That's right.
Amending the zoning ordinance 79 to limit building coverage, the portion of land parcels that may be covered by buildings to 40%.
Move adoption of ordinance 209.
Second it.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Jerry. Discussion, roll call vote.
Maher.
Aye.
Lane.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Haverkamp.
Aye.
Carried.
Then we have second consideration of ordinance number 210, regulating and adopting requirements, restrictions, and procedures for subdivision of land.
Move adoption of ordinance 210.
Second it.
Motion by Mike, second by Jerry.
Dottie.
Second by Dottie. Discussion, roll call vote.
Lane.
Aye.
Zimmerman.
Aye.
Casada.
No.
Okay, Haverkamp.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Carried 4-1.
Okay, then second consideration of ordinance 211, amending ordinance number 191, which requires parkland dedication when certain development occurs to not require a separate development plan or plat where parkland dedication is shown in subdivision plats to be approved by the city council.
I motion adoption.
Okay, motion by Sylvia. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim Lane. Discussion. Okay, roll call vote.
Zimmerman,
Aye.
Casada,
Aye.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
carried.
Second consideration of ordinance number 212, regulating development of properties containing environmentally sensitive areas.
Motion.
Motion by
Second.
Sylvia, second
Second.
by Dottie. Discussion, roll call.
Can we collapse this, this ordinance?
Yeah, why can't we call it?
Let's just collapse. If I could go back to the other votes too, let's collapse them.
You want this specific one, number 212?
212 and, Steve, is it too late to go back to the prior ones?
What,
No,
is it going to save time? Let's just move on.
well, no, you can go back to, I mean, you can undo it by rescinding them or just kind of starting over. and-
Okay, let's just continue. I'll collapse going forward with the other ones.
So move to collapse and then if that, yeah.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
We have to vote to
Okay,
move
so
to
we're now doing
collapse.
212.
Right.
Right.
Okay, a roll call vote.
Motion to collapse, though.
Right, we are.
Oh,
Second.
oh, we
On
don't
the
have,
motion to
okay, so a motion to collapse the second consideration of ordinance 212. Is
Yep.
that right?
To
Yep.
second and
And
third
a
reading.
motion by Sylvia and second by Mike. So to collapse, we'll vote on that. Roll call vote for that,
Yes.
right? Right.
So we're voting to collapse. Casada,
Yes.
Aye.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Zimmerman.
No.
Okay. Carried. Sorry, 4-1.
Okay, so now we'll have second and third consideration of ordinance number 212, regulating development of properties containing environmentally sensitive areas.
I motion.
Discussion.
We've already
Okay.
had that.
Yeah, Sylvia and
Yep.
Dottie have done the first
Sylvia
and
and
second.
Dottie, that was the one for them.
Yes.
Okay, roll call vote.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Zimmerman,
Aye.
Casada,
Aye.
carried.
Okay, second consideration of ordinance 213, amending ordinance number 169, which regulates stormwater runoff. Is there a motion to collapse?
I motion to
Make a
collapse.
motion.
Motion to collapse by
I'll second.
Sylvia and second by Dottie. Discussion, roll call vote for collapsing the vote of number 213.
Is there no-
1 second, please.
Okay,
Is there no discussion on the motion?
yeah, we can have
Yeah,
discussion.
I just think the motion to collapse was misused on ordinance 208, and that's why I'm voting against the collapsing. It was done too readily, I think, without the consideration that respected the residents' views and feelings.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Maher,
Aye.
Yeah.
to collapse, I'm sorry. Maher,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
Zimmerman,
Nope.
Casada,
Aye.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
carried 4-1.
Okay, so second and third consideration of ordinance number 213.
Motion to,
Yeah. We've already. had
Motion
it.
by
Yeah.
I'll second.
Yeah, we-
Second.
Second by Dottie.
Okay.
Okay, discussion, roll call vote.
I think we're at Zimmerman,
Aye.
Casada,
aye.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Lane,
Aye.
carried.
Okay, very good. Now we'll go to mayor's report. And I circulated a September-October mayor's report, and I wanted to read from it for the video recording. I am sad to report that longtime resident and city volunteer John R. McClure passed away on September 20th. John was our city's volunteer videographer for 5.5 years. John was instrumental in starting University Heights City Council meeting recordings, using his own video recording equipment to produce video to local TV Channel 4 and establishing our council meeting to that regular program schedule on Thursday evenings at 9 p.m. John donated not only his valuable time, but also his resources to our community and its video programming. He was passionate about the excellence, quality, and accuracy of his recordings and provided complimentary copies to city council members and to any resident upon request. John also donated our microphones as well as the plexiglass stand podium that we use today. But it is his glowing qualities of patience, intelligence, and kindness to all that will be most of all forever remembered. Our deepest sympathy to John's wife, Chris, and son, J.D. He will be missed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for those words, because John, the whole time I was on here, I never saw anyone, all John wanted to do was give and help and assist and make things more and more transparent for the whole community with his taping and, I mean, sending us tapes. It was just phenomenal, and a real true resident and citizen of University Heights we could all be proud of, and just unbelievable. So anyway, and John, of course, had the illness. We all knew it, and he endured and endured and endured. He wanted to see JD graduate, and he did, and he saw from high school, and now JD finished his freshman year, and now he's on to his sophomore year. So John achieved several goals, and I know that was one of his most important ones. So it was, thank you again, Louise.
I've had him described as a gentle soul,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think that is John.
Yeah, each of the council talked to me and said these words,
Yeah.
some of these kind words to me about John.
He's a doll.
Yeah, he'll be missed.
The fact that I could set this up today in only half an hour doesn't even begin to think about the 2.5 hours it used to take us with John's unbelievable Rube Goldberg.
Yeah.
Man, people couldn't believe he had 5 video cameras strung together, and for a town of 1,000, I mean, we would not be sitting in this type of room today if it weren't for him and what he did in terms of really boosting the professionalism of our meetings and recordings. And I will be forever grateful. I'm incredibly grateful. I did get to tell him not too long before he passed away that working with him was one of the highlights of my 8 years on council. So he will certainly be missed.
It's probably the highlight.
Well, the Class C liquor license votes are pretty good too, but let's not go there yet.
All I can tell you is that John was phenomenal as a new counselor on board. I'd reach out to him and ask him for any videos that might answer questions regarding a subject matter, and oh my gosh, did he know exactly with precision where to find them, where to get them, and drop me off copies. He was wonderful at helping inform the counselors upon request, and he was just so gracious and always cheerful. There wasn't a down day with John at all. There was always a smile.
I never saw him angry or frustrated or vicious.
No, not at all. So I'm so pleased to have met him.
And just so the community knows, Louise has coordinated a donation from among the city staff and council that'll go to on our behalf to John's
To the
memorial fund. So
Chris set up for him. Yeah. Very nice. Thank you. And the council's been very busy the last few months, but I wanted to look again at the Cedar Rapids signs and try to make a decision. People don't know where we're located. I sent the signs to Mike, and I also talked, Chris and I met with Clayton Hargrave last night about other things, and I was telling him about this. And I sent the signs to him, and I thought he came up with a pretty good suggestion. He pretty much liked all the signage and said, how about you eliminate the pedestal signs, because you can always add them, and that would save, it saves around $1,100, I think. Yeah, well, $1,150 there. And he was saying, when we looked outside at the pedestal signs, there seems to be a Maggie's, and then there's maybe 4 more, and there's probably going to be more businesses there than that, and maybe we don't need to be there, but if we use the stenciling that I suggested.
Yeah. I'll pull that up. Give me a second. Keep talking.
and that might help, them coming. And we have 2 choices, and the last time the council kind of suggested University Heights City Hall. And then the other choice was University Heights Police. It says University Heights and then Police on the overhead sign. And
I can't find the one with the.
it says Designs.
Yeah, here's the one.
Yeah, that's how it looks on the overhead.
That's nice.
That's nice. It's pretty comprehensive.
There, and then of course that will be backlit. It's kind of similar to Maggie's.
Yeah.
It has a nice look.
Yeah.
And then see the stencils.
That's what I'm not finding. Just a second.
You're not finding it?
Give me a second. Keep vamping, Louise.
Well, the other one where it would say City Hall, it would say police there, POLICE.
Right.
And our police chief liked that choice.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so that's, but what we have with the stencils is we'd have police department on the glass door, and we'd have City of University Heights on the side of the door, and then back here it'd say Community Center, and then at the door it says, I think, City Hall.
Here it is.
You found it? Okay, good.
I like that one the best.
Right.
Or-
It's
the one
nice
that
header,
doesn't
nice
open
umbrella.
in a JPEG. Or a
What's the feeling of others about the pedestal sign?
Okay, so, and
I'm okay not
this
having
is
the pedestal
this is
sign.
also an updated printing that Chris Lyons suggested, because the other one was a little old-fashioned, and this is more. And so see,
The one to the left is what you're referring to as?
yeah, you could put City of University Heights or Community Center, and then the door says could be Community Center.
That'd be the back door here.
But
yeah.
I think the first picture and the last picture, kind of kitty-cornered, I think they're the same. It's just one says city and one says community center.
Oh.
And then the front door, of course, we wouldn't have the hours.
Yeah.
That was just a suggestion.
So you mean if you do this, you won't have the sign above the door?
No, we'd
No.
have the sign above.
The sign above the door would say the City Hall sign.
City Hall,
And then we'd have police department on the door.
Yeah.
I
Police
think that's
department.
nice. Yeah.
Is this the same font as the sign?
I gave him the font from the sign, and he copied it. This is Hollywood Graphics,
I see.
gentlemen, and I said, could you make it
'Cause
look
they do
similar
it.
to the
They
sign?
do the-
And this is what he came up with. Now, we could change the coloring,
I think it should be the same color as the sign to make it
like white.
I-
Could
yeah.
you do city, like where the police department is, above it? Could you just do small, little City of University Heights? Or would you
Of
need?
course,
Would
of
you
course.
need that even if you have the sign
If you have
above?
the big
I think if you have
City
the big
University
sign
Heights
I
above
think
it,
the
don't
big
think
sign
it-
is enough.
But I think you're right, though, Jerry. Just doing police department in white makes it unified, and
Yeah, I'm no.
The white background
can't believe I'm
and
discussing
outline it in
design
black.
issues in a
Yeah,
meeting because I'm so bad.
I'm not a visual guy, and when we had ours done, we ran it through Kevin Munson to make sure that it was consistent with what others might do, and that, I think consistency is
Right.
what we're all looking for. And if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
I think
no,
Kevin will be
that's right.
the first to tell us.
Well, I don't want to use a lot of time on this, but
I don't think it takes a lot of time. Oh, you mean here?
yeah.
I'm going through Kevin is very fast.
Yeah, I know, because I actually asked Kevin about
Yeah.
other things. And, but, I mean, do you want it to say City of University Heights there or Community, I think somewhere it should say City of University Heights.
I don't like those on the right.
Those two?
No. I think either of those are, I think the
Well, see,
police
this is the
department
back
certainly-
door. This
Right.
top one is the back door.
Right.
Oh,
The bottom left one is the front door.
front door.
Yeah.
And then the 1 and 4 is this window here.
Right.
Oh.
And
But I think if you put community center on the back door here, you don't need anything in the window.
No, I don't.
Yeah, that
That's,
would- yeah.
and once again, I do it in
Or-
the same.
Or on the front windows or anything.
does everybody like that with the white, with the black trim? And we'll have him draw it up and look at it,
That'd be good.
Okay.
you know? And so I I'm not sure about the pedestal. I mean, I know that Jerry asked that question about what about the pedestals? Did you say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have a vested interest sort of in not having it on the pedestal because it clutters the pedestal.
Right.
But I know
It saves us $1,100 too, and if we
but
have it
I
on
know
the door, we don't need
consistency in signage is very important too, and I can't make that decision. That's why but it's an important issue, I think.
Okay. So does the council want to eliminate the pedestal at this point?
I think
At
that's
this
fine.
time, I mean, we can
Yeah.
look and see once there are other businesses that come in and they go in, they're probably going to go into it, and then we'll see if we want to get in there
Do you
somewhere.
agree?
Yeah.
Because you like the city hall, correct?
Yeah.
That's more important than pedestal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. We'll get this going. And then the last thing was the mail drop box, and that's it was Chris, the city clerk and the police chief would like a mail, well, it's a drop box for outside the front door. And I don't know if you got that photo. I actually sent you a black drop box, and it says mail/drop box OUP or something in the.
I thought you were talking about Dropbox is a cloud storage
if
thing.
you
Like,
go
what are you
back to
doing
the
with
front.
that, Louise? Okay, just a second.
Kevin Munson approved it.
It all began when a rental permit was put in the mailbox where the drugs are dropped off.
Oh.
So that's how this all started, just to let you know.
Oh, that might fit.
And we had one. Okay, that's the drop.
We had one at the old place.
That's the drop box, and of course it's got to be keyed, and then you open the slot. And if you see the front of the building, I had a picture of that too. The where the police, there's a horizontal wood. Anyway, that's what it looks like, and that's okay with you too. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's very minor. Okay, and that we'll get going on that. Then I'm following mayor's report. Okay, housing inspector report. Is Stan here yet?
Right back there.
Oh, he's hiding. Hi, Stan. Did you hide on purpose?
Pull up a chair.
Sure. Good idea. And then we'll give you a microphone too. We wouldn't want you to be without a microphone, Stan. So were you here when Kyle Vogel was here?
I wasn't, but he called me.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It's a small community. I don't know if he was calling to ask for forgiveness or really give me a heads up, but is that on how you want it? Is that mic on? Can everybody hear?
If you get closer to it, it'll, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good evening. Everybody have a chance to look through the material that I provided. I'll defer to Steve on this a lot. I kind of sprung some stuff on him. We had a conversation early on. I gave him some basic framework of what ideas had been floated out there. And then as they developed in other communities, I adapted them for how they would work with University Heights. So we really have an opportunity here to develop a guideline that works for all of University Heights. And I think it's pretty safe to say that most of us would say the old guidelines of two unrelated people living together was not workable. And I've heard that in multiple ways from multiple people. No one really wanted to be honest about it at the end of the day because it's not, something that you really want to say, well, I want more people living in my town. But it was always, well, those are nice kids, and well, those are good people and they're not causing problems, so I'm not going to tell you where it's at. So I think we all knew that wasn't workable. So, here's an opportunity to really come up with something that works for the residents of University Heights. So I think it's important to spend some time on it, to be thoughtful about it. In my report, I said that it has to be something that is enforceable. I think it's important to say that University Heights should not be anti-rental. I think there's a place for rental within University Heights. again, it's that balance of all the properties, the commercial, the owner occupied, and the rental. We have good residents here if they own or if they rent, and we just want more good, happy, long-term residents in University Heights. As we move forward, we are on the bleeding edge of this. So there will be unintended consequences as we move through this. There's other communities looking at it. It's interesting to see how other communities are responding to it and how a lot of us came to the same place. We did share information, but at the same time, not all of that information was shared. So it was interesting how we read the same literature and tried to get there. So it's been said before that 95 to 99% of college communities use that familial status to regulate occupancy. So to go away from that in our situation is difficult.
So Stan, what exactly led to the unhinging of the familiar tie? Can you tell us just for public?
It was an issue at the state legislature. It's been at the legislature over multiple years. It was something that specifically landlords in Ames and Cedar Falls really pushed. The landlord in Ames just so happens to be on the state legislature, which kind of gives him a leg up. And then there was someone involved in property management in Cedar Falls that had purchased numerous homes near campus with multiple bedrooms and found out that he could not rent them as he saw fit at his highest and best use, and really championed it from that angle. So over a course of multiple years, they put together a consensus of a very diverse group of people to change it.
Yeah, Stan's right. There was a specific legal challenge out of Ames that the Iowa Supreme Court rejected and said, yes, a city may regulate occupancy based upon familial status. So the court said a city can do just exactly what we had been doing. So that created more impetus in the legislature, and then the issue became one of those odd, politics makes strange bedfellows kind of situations where you had sort of a, what I would call maybe a conservative, typically Republican bent, business-oriented bent, saying, why are we telling landlords and property owners they can't go out and make money and do their business and provide what people want in the market? And you had maybe a more liberal bent, maybe typically associated with Democrats, that were saying, why is the government telling people who they can and can't live with? Okay, and so you had a convergence of those groups together, and there was a pretty good political push to say we want to do this. And the only people really, well, I mean, I don't have my finger on the pulse of everything at the legislature, but the League of Cities and the county governments and some other folks like that were really the only ones seriously opposing it, and they did successfully for one round, but not the second round.
Actually, they stopped it twice.
Yeah.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on a more political note, when the Democrats headed the Senate, they had a person from Cedar Falls who was head of the committee on this thing, and he didn't want it, so he held it up.
Yeah.
Firefighter. Former firefighter.
Was he? I don't know what he was.
Oh,
but
yeah.
anyway,
I was there.
and then when it flipped to the Republicans, the Republican became head of it. And so that's kind of the political reality of things. Well, and obviously what Steve was saying, you had a big push. And
Sure.
I just
you didn't
want to make
everybody
sure that
pushing.
the question was asked so that the public had an opportunity to appreciate all
Right.
the
This isn't
the
something that
backstory.
we're bringing because we want to move in this direction. Our hand is being forced, which is, I think we make, lemons out of lemonade at that point, or lemonade out of
The bleeding edge comment, I think, is well taken. How important is it that we're really talking here about a way to circumvent the legislature, are we not? And is that a useful thing to do?
I don't think of this as circumvent at all. I think it's because we've had one method of maintaining what I think are very obvious community benefits and rights. We've done it through our zoning ordinance that's relied on familial status. I think the fact that we need to also maintain community standards in some other manner. This is a lot. I mean, there's a lot more detail to this, and I think you're right, Stan, about lemonade from lemons. It's actually addressing a whole lot of things very explicitly, which I think will be better for everybody in the long run.
And I think your point, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to look at it, but
No, I'm not. I'm just asking the question.
the legislature was pretty clear in saying, you know, if you want to regulate, don't pass proxy legislation. If you want to regulate nuisance, if you want to regulate parking, if you want to regulate activities and party houses, then regulate them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking.
Don't say, you know, if three of you are unrelated, that stuff's going to happen, so we'll prohibit that and we'll solve it all.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the view.
That's what I was hoping.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it.
Good.
I think there's a need to be proactive about it. I think there's members of the realtor community, not the realtor, but the rental community that are saying, well, what could go wrong? I mean, you're just, you know, you're fighting things that haven't happened. But I think that it's serious enough and things can change in such a rapid fashion that you have to take proactive steps to get in front of it.
But thank you for getting out in front of it, and thank you for setting that stuff out. It was really helpful.
Quick question before I don't know, you know, diving through this. When you talk about I got to go back and find it, the IPMC.
Yes.
And talk about that applies to all homes.
Correct.
Speaking on behalf of other older homeowners besides myself, what are those kinds of requirements going to be in terms of maintaining your old home? I mean, is that a big change?
That's a good question. So first of all, we're not systematically inspecting single-family owner-occupied properties.
Right.
But if we're receiving complaints that, well, Mrs. Mather's house has had a broken window for the past 6 years, what can we do about it? You know, that's a conversation where you go and find out what's going on. Right now, our code is a little bit silent on that, on an owner-occupied. And you also look at, say, fencing issues, that a fence has fallen in disrepair on an owner-occupied. You know, at what point is it a nuisance? You know, this allows us to have that conversation a little bit easier.
Okay.
Stan, how close is the International Property Maintenance Code to a homeowners association?
It's not. The IPMC essentially says your house was built under the residential codes, which we have adopted, and as you maintain that house, they should remain in compliance with the residential code.
What kind of requirements are placed on a property with the International Property Maintenance Code, which we'll call shorthand, if we can agree, IPMC?
That's what it's in up there. Yeah.
What are you looking for? What?
Let's talk about some of the common walk us through a year and a half worth of nuisance reports from your perspective and how they would apply under the IPMC.
You know, if you had a home that was falling in disrepair from the outside, that, you know, the paint wasn't being maintained, that the roof was obviously failing, if there was no, you know, money being put into maintaining the house, the city would have the ability to step in and say, you know, you have to maintain your property.
To what standards is this maintenance being held to?
I don't understand that question.
For example, if you have peeling paint, is the presumption that you're going to hire a professional to come in?
There's workmanship quality built into it, but it still allows for people to paint their own homes. You know, there's other rules that.
So it's a get it done type of a code.
Right. It's not. It doesn't prescribe that it has to be. You know, you don't have to get your heat gun out there and remove all your paint and, you know, put 2 coats of primer and, you know, seal everything. No, it's just. It's a minimum code, but it just gives the city a little authority to come in and start that conversation. Whereas, it's my feeling under our current code, there's not even a provision for it.
Does it mainly target aesthetics from
No, it would target, say, if you were walking up to a step and the handrail was broken, that steps were loose. You know, if you get into homes, there's other electrical issues, plumbing issues.
Who else in the community in the corridor, say Lynn and Johnson County, have adopted the IPMC?
Iowa City has a housing code. and it's loosely based on the housing code, but because of how our code of ordinances are written, it's Iowa City's, but it follows the format of the IPMC. I believe Coralville has the IPMC. I could, West Liberty has it. You could refer to any jurisdiction that Terry Gert does building inspection in, and then also assists with rental, that it has the IPMC. And the good thing about it is it's not us sitting around developing a housing code. It's, you know, it's an international recognized code that's updated, much like the residential building code is and the commercial building code. Things are looked at.
Stan, you've sat on this council. You're where you are now. You have this knowledge base. How do you think we should proceed to get something done?
I think you should give Steve and I a nod that says you're moving in the right direction. I think Steve and I need to sit down and kind of flesh some of this out. I think you need to look through here and say, you know what, I'm not comfortable with that provision. I'm comfortable with that provision. If there's anything that you don't feel we're going in the right direction, I think you need to let us know now. But if you have a general idea that I think you're moving in the right direction, you say that at this time.
Would it be good to have a counselor in that mix or a resident in that mix?
I'd be interested
I would too.
in being involved in it.
That's
Yeah.
your call. I mean, you're always going to want people to have a seat at the table, you know, and I think there's always going to be members of the community that want a seat at the table. You're going to have members of the rental property community that want their seat at the table, and that's your decision if you want them to have that great a voice or if you want them to go through you to offer their input.
No, I think having a counselor or a resident on that committee, if you will, would be very helpful.
I agree with that. Personally, just having been city attorney for a while, I think it'd be a good idea. This isn't in the derogation of that at all, but we do have a timetable. The legislature adopted this law this past legislative session, but unlike most laws that take effect July 1, the legislature gives cities an extra 6 months and said this familial status regulation can continue till December 31, 2017, starting January 1, 2018, no more.
Right.
So we've got basically till the end of the year, which gives you 2 regular meetings and certainly a special meeting.
60-some days.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But
So,
but another member of your group wouldn't necessarily hold it up, and if it did, we should just tell you to push it forward anyway.
Yeah, not at all. I just wanted to, my comment wasn't necessarily in response to your question. I think it does play in, because if we get a group, it's harder to schedule, but that's not a reason not to do it. We just need to know we need to get going.
right,
and
right.
keep
I'm
going.
thinking conference calls, that's the
Yeah.
way I've managed other, you know, when we did I guess the building code with Terry Gert when we were adopting it for University Heights, we just worked in a committee and used the phone, and people dialed in when they could, and that's how we proceeded.
Yeah,
We didn't
or
stop.
I'm available
I am too.
any way.
All right,
if
so I
you're
do have one
interested.
question.
Why don't we have Sylvia and Dottie arm wrestle?
Well, I think they can both work on it. There's still,
She
as long
has
as we
a
don't
streets and
advertise.
sidewalks background, and,
Yeah, fine.
right, perfect, and I've been doing zoning previously.
I don't think that speaks to Steve's concern, though. I think the smaller the better. One would be better than 2 in this case.
Well, I did zoning for 30 years for the county, so.
I don't think we need to get into a technical argument, Dottie, we'll just both be there.
Oh, you work for the county? We won't hold that against you.
Now, Stan, I did want to ask one quick question for the rest of council. Are there any recommendations?
I'm sorry, Steve.
Heading in the direction of splitting any homes into duplexes? I know that has been an issue with other jurisdictions, and I wanted to get some.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, so I think that can be handled,
Oh, I'm not interested. From where I'm getting the read, people want to keep these houses single. They don't want opportunities to
Yeah.
create duplexes within the basement of one home. And
right. And I think that can be, it may be able to be strengthened. I don't see that as having been regulated or changed by the legislature. That is the city's authority, and I think the city's current zoning ordinances can be maybe they can be looked at and strengthened as a part of this process, but that's prohibited. Presently.
I don't mean to be a jerk, but my question about next steps was to move off of this topic and get to the next, so we move on.
I'll wrap up quickly. So 17, requiring that permanent physical separation between units and existing duplexes. That's one of the things that we're seeing some question about in our town, especially with different tenants living in these dwellings now, and they find out that they have a single hollow core door that's separating them from their upstairs tenant, and this just kind of I think it forces people to make that decision. Are you going to maintain that as a duplex, or is it time to operate it as a single family? And as we look at this and you allow higher occupancies, honestly, there's no reason for those to remain duplexes for the sake of occupancy. That this would be an opportunity to return those to a single family status. And then another issue is where we've permitted single families to have separate kitchens, but you squint and it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. It's a duplex, and that door gets shut as soon as we leave. And to put a provision in there that it requires that second means of egress in those situations, because it's not a safe living condition. You have tenants that are willing to collude with the property owner to live in those situations, and at the same point, they still need the protection.
Just a couple of comments. Listening to Kyle today, I took the most out of that about the parking spaces, especially for Grandview and One University Place. I don't understand everything in here about that, but I think that needs to be looked at closely.
Right.
The rooming house number is 4 or 5 to me, but in that kind of ballpark. And the rental permit cap, I'll let y'all work on that, but I think there needs to be a cap personally. So, anyway.
So Jim, you're expressing an interest in having a renter cap per property
just
home.
telling that for the group.
Yeah, and I think Pat Bauer has done a lot of work on that. I've seen some graphics that he's put out that has divided up neighborhoods and the percentage that's currently rental. I think that's usable. You could, if not, you could look at University Heights as a whole. Those are decisions that still will have to be made. So,
Stan, are there any of these issues that you believe will not be able to be resolved and would most likely end up in the being addressed by another council? Because we only have 60 days or so to put a Band-Aid to the existing situation before midnight.
It
January
might take
1
some
comes
special
through.
meetings, as you said in your report.
yeah, I'll defer to Steve on that.
For example,
in Iowa City, we put a priority on certain things. They closely mirror this, so there are other items that as we get into the that converting rental properties to owner occupied, that's not going to be January 1st. 19, the reinvestment. I mean, that's a future thing.
Here, can I make a recommendation, since we're starting this already? How about if we turn these 19 items and have council prioritize them? That way, when we walk into committee, we have a clear indicator of where everyone stands in prioritization of these issues. And we don't waste time misinterpreting or misreading the rest of the council.
I think I'd let the housing inspector and the city attorney prioritize the list first.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I am fine with y'all prioritizing, Sylvia. You generally know what we want, or what we're thinking about, and that sort of stuff. So.
Honestly, number 12 is probably going to get pushed until July 1st of next year. 14 would probably get pushed to July of next year. 13 you have to have in place if you have the caps.
Freeze it.
Right.
So I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory what
It's zoning overlay, yep.
has to happen.
You may want to push up 14, especially if the hotel motel option passes. We could collect starting January 1st.
Right, and North
and we
Liberty
have at least
already
2.
has- North Liberty has a good model for, that they passed in 2016. Okay, all right.
Does that give you enough?
Yeah. Yep.
It's good work. This is good work,
The
Stan.
push and pull between what rental managers want and what is good
No,
for.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate the input that Kyle gives. Kyle and I have a very good working relationship, and at the end of the day, we'll, make fun of each other and all sorts of things. But yeah, I think we have to do what's best for University Heights.
That's right.
No, I appreciate this. This was well done.
Yeah.
Great job. Thank you very much.
And I especially loved having that you brought in Ames. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
I enjoyed reading Ames's staff report, especially how they put in there what the property owners wanted. The
Yeah.
rental property owners.
Yeah.
No regulation.
No,
Yeah, of course.
No kidding.
Yeah.
we're good.
Thank you, Stan. We'll go to the legal report. Steve.
So the first thing if I followed what happened earlier in the meeting, at least in my mind, you collapsed the 3 readings of ordinances 212 and 213 and adopted them finally for the 3rd time. But you did not do that for 2009, 2010, 2011, which is just fine with me. I just want to make sure that's what you intended to do, or if you want to do.
We need to have something to do in November. So.
That's fine. Okay, great. And the only thing that I had on our report, or my report, related to the One University Place TIF and the annual appropriation. Those of you who weren't on the council or weren't, or I guess you were on the council last year, but the TIF that was adopted by the council, agreed to with the developer, is what's known as a rebate TIF, and it's an annual appropriation TIF. The rebate component or the rebate characteristic of it means that there's no money that flows, sort of back to the developer, except for those monies that are paid by the developer or by other owners in the development in the form of property taxes. So it's a rebate. That's not news, I'm just reminding you. And then the annual appropriation requires, as a part of the TIF development agreement, requires the developer to give the city a certification by October 16th of each year, and a worksheet in a form that's attached to and prescribed by the development agreement that calculates out, what the increment, the I in TIF stands for increment, and of course all of the taxable value of this particular development, the one we're sitting in and the one we're talking about, it's all increment because it had been a church and therefore wasn't taxed. So the calculation is, what's the valuation? We get that from the Johnson County assessor. Actually, the developer gets that for purposes of the worksheet, and then we, people in my office, confirm that. So what's the increment? What's the valuation? What's the increment? And then there are certain components of the city's tax millage that that play into TIF or that are impacted by TIF, and there's certain things that aren't. So we sit down with the auditor and kind of go through all that stuff, come up with a number. The city's TIF development agreement with the developer of OUP provides for a 95% rebate TIF, and as a consequence, if approved, the rebate goes 95% back to the developer. Again, once taxes are paid in the coming fiscal year, and 5% is retained by the city for the council to use in any way the city council wants. Those of you who were on the council at the time the TIF development agreement was discussed and entered into in August of 2015, the discussion was that maybe those funds would be used for the phrase neighborhood revitalization or neighborhood stabilization. I don't remember that phrase being used then, but I think it was the same sentiment, what I recall anyway. People talked about like affordable housing, down payment assistance and those kinds of things. As the council reached an agreement with the developer, the 5% that the city retains is unrestricted. So once in a while somebody has said, well, that 5%, we're supposed to use that for affordable housing. It's not, you can use it for any lawful purpose, and if that's the lawful purpose you want to use it for, go for it, but you're not restricted by the terms of the agreement in that way. So that's the resolution that's before you, and the explanation of it, 1742. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
I'd move adoption of Resolution 1742.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike and second by Jim. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Let's see. Lane,
Aye.
Zimmerman,
Abstain?
Casada,
Abstain.
Haverkamp,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
carried.
I don't think I had any, excuse me, I don't think I had anything else on my report. Oh,
The
yes, I'm-
sign letter.
Oh, the sign letter, yeah. So, as I said in my report, somebody asked me, hey, aren't political candidates supposed to keep their signs off the city right away? And didn't you write a letter about that a few years back? And the answer is yes and yes. So I sent that letter out again as a part of my legal report. I asked Mike to put it on the city website. I think all the candidates have received it one way or another. And yeah, so that little parking area, boulevard, whatever you want to call it, between the curb and the sidewalk, and on streets that don't have sidewalks, about the same distance. The signs are supposed to go on the homeowner's side of that right-of-way line.
Okay. Discussion of adopting and amending policies. Sylvia, you asked this to be put on the agenda.
That's right, and the policies or adoptions for discussion is the city right-of-way, including placement of telecommunications towers and equipment. This is another piece of deregulation from Des Moines that has the backstory that in order to facilitate cellular-wide broadband access throughout all of Iowa, no municipality is allowed to place restrictions on certain type of small cell attachments. So if you have a water tower, if you have utility poles, lights, or other infrastructure, priority to access those government-owned assets is now lawful. Before, municipalities could place restrictions on what came onto their facilities, or altogether say we skip on having attachments on our equipment. That's not the case anymore, but fortunately for University Heights, we don't have very many facilities or assets to place items on. So the conversation or comments tonight are twofold. Part one involves, we do have some streets and we have some light poles by Stella's where certainly some of these telecom attachments could very well come onto. So we are working with legal to come up with some appropriate conditions for how those items attach to these facilities. The second question that requires consensus from this council tonight is what to do about new utility poles. Utility poles are they're an item that could very well be permitted and allowed right now. In University Heights, we could have a whole bunch of new poles up and down Melrose. So, yeah, there's no regulation, Mike. So the concern there is we have a huge Melrose beautification project coming up in 2020. We've had the issue of people, clearly saying that these are not aesthetically pleasing sites to have throughout town. So the question is, do we as a council, as a matter of policy, want to restrict the creation or addition of new utility poles so that a telecom company can attach their equipment? So I just want to let you know that my research indicates that other cities don't take that position. Coralville has a preference for underground burial of all of their utilities. That's one. And which means that any above ground utility poles that come on have to be done by special permitting, special evaluation. I, for one, think that's the better approach. We should probably start with the general rule that says no new utility poles, whether they be for cellular communications or not, and let the Board of Adjustment help us with making a decision as to whether the pole comes in or not, or the zoning commission or some other body. But I just think that holistically for the community, I think it's a better position to not aesthetically ruin that by permitting.
I'd be interested in Josiah's input on this too, because I think to put those poles up it contravenes really the intent of the Melrose Scape